Potential for change. There's a saying, is Diana here? Diana? No, it's okay. She'll correct my French. Plus ça change, plus la mène. The more things change, the more they remain the same, stay the same. But not with Theosophists. Our potential for change. Now, 3 weeks ago, the 138th convention, International Convention of the Theosophical Society, was in full swing over in Adyar, India, 3 weeks ago. And I know members of the New Zealand section, in fact, over there, had attended it. The theme for the International Convention was New Mind for a New World. New Mind for a New World. And there would have been some pretty interested presenters preparing before the International Convention began, because from what I hear it was quite an active group over there doing all sorts of things. It seems to be a transition time. And there'd been serious thinking, and I would hope some lateral thinking being done by the presenters. And there are about 8 who attended, and I had privy to seeing the actual program and who was presenting. I'm not naming names, but I just think the titles that they chose give some indication of their perspective that they are taking on this theme, New Mind for a New World. From Brazil, the title came, The Urgency for a New Mind. There were 2 inputs from Australia. First input was titled, The Mind, a Vessel for Ignorance or a Vessel for Truth. And the second input, New Mind, a Power that Maketh All Things New. From the USA, the input was titled, Inspired Living, the Basis for Understanding. From England, The Compassionate Mind. 3 talks from India, proportional representation. The Nascent Mind, at the embryonic mind. Next one, Let Every Moment be a New Dawn. And the last one, which it's an interesting one. Vertical mutation of mind. Vertical mutation of mind. So that sounds a little bit lateral. But I know you can't gather anything from the titles. But I really look forward to reading the texts from these talks. In this time, as I said before, of transition in our international society and opportunity for change. Whether it is old wine in new bottles or new wine in old bottles, that I can hear someone thinking, as long as it's wine. But what is important is, I think, that we build community where we can all contribute to an ongoing dialogue about the theosophical mind and the theosophical worldview, keeping it fresh and alive, out of the textbooks, out of intellectual knowledge alone, but by growing it as a living power in our lives, in our living. Making and building that bridge between intellectual knowledge and direct perception of what is. I've been influenced, of course, as we all are, by a number of writers, and Blavatsky and Besson, name them all, but also Professor I.K. Timney. And he was very, very strong on that point. It's time in our society that was a core of people who would be brave enough to have a go at converting intellectual knowledge, translating it into direct perception. And maybe we've been just leaving it to Blavatsky's teachings for too long. We need them as a basis. They are foundation documents. The Theosophy is older, is much older than 1875 when the society was first established. Okay? So it doesn't confine to a small group. So let's keep those thoughts in mind, and really, you can probably guess what I'm going to talk about in terms of our potential for change. The subtitle is New Mind for a New World. So I'm kind of copying the theme from Adyar because I think it's important, very important, new mind for a new world. As I see it, the creating or creation of a new mind is not just adding on or doing a bit of nip and tuck or any just partial makeovers. It really means going to the foundations, the foundation stones of the old, if you like, and taking a good look at them and seeing if they fit the need of today's society, or even if they fit the eternal need of what we are and who we are ourselves. There was a great prophet and teacher once who said, "Build not your house on the sand." May not be the right words, I'm not a great biblical scholar, but the idea of don't build your house on sand, build it on bedrock. So we need to examine the foundations of our present mind. Are they strong? Are they true? Are they our reality? So I'm saying a new mind needs to not just tweak at the edges or shuffle around at the end result of thinking, which is actions, not just changing actions instead of being too judgmental, just be less judgmental. What I'm suggesting is you go back to see why you're judgmental in the first place. Okay? Not to intellectualise it too much, because we do love to do that a lot. We've been, if you like, programmed to do that. But to actually go to the roots and root out those things we don't want in that old mind. It's a simple concept, really. And the other aspect of the mind I see that is important to remember, because you read The Science of Yoga, and it talks all about modifications of the mind, all the things that have been modified in the mind. So the mind is really the faculty of knowing of the soul, the faculty of the soul, of knowing. So this faculty of knowing, I'll talk about this later, but it kind of spits out what you put into it. Our programming from birth, what we've piled in there, all sorts of things, including attitudes about ourselves and others and judgments and what's good and bad. That's all there, and that comes out again immediately. I sort of usually clutch my left hemisphere of the brain because I think it's located somewhere there, right? Because that's the very active side, logical side. Comes in, goes out. And this side doesn't get much of a look in. And of course, this is the side, I think, that's more to do with the spiritual connection, the right hemisphere of the brain, to do with the spiritual, if you like, interpretation of things. It's to do with things like acceptance and compassion and compassionate understanding instead of this side, judgment. Judgment. Okay. So the journey, in a sense, becomes the journey from judgment. And Betty gave us the outline of this morning, and forgiveness. Thank you, Betty. And judging is like, I'll come to it later, but it is really a weapon of choice of our emotional defence system. Much more about that later. The mind that is true to itself, is open and clear and reflects what's on the other side or on the inner. So it has to be clear, totally cleared, to represent the truth within of who we are, and not cluttered up in its way of interpreting the world. So this is our potential, greatest potential for change for however long it takes. However long it takes, perhaps, to raise our vibrations, to raise our consciousness to a much higher level than what our lower mind, our programmed mind that we've had built into us since childhood, will actually allow us to actually express. So what I'm saying tonight, a lot of it is going to be extrapolating or coming out of some of the key principles of the ancient wisdom teachings as I understand them at this point. And I might say something about Pamela Keyes, your wonderful editor, when she asked me to write an article earlier this year. And she said, look, just some little article that we can just put in just to make sure that they know who you are when you come over at the convention. And I didn't do that. I sat there and I thought, well, where am I going with this? And I pushed my boundaries, and it took a darn long time to write. And it was like blood, sweat and tears that made me think of a whole lot of things. And really, since that time, it's happened again. So tonight I will be talking about some things maybe come out of left field, and so I'll expect some either discussion tonight or maybe in the morning there's part 2 in the workshop, which is experimenting with our perceptions. So I'm learning, you'll hear something tonight and you'll think, where did that come from? Or you think, oh, I know that anyhow. It's okay. So it doesn't matter. We're all learning, and that's the most important thing in Theosophy, to have an open mind. First thing I'd like to do is explore the features of the new mind a little more than I have already mentioned. Then I want to have a look, just to whip over to the purpose of the society and just check out that it really is consistent with what we're supposed to be about. And actually to look at a bigger plan, looking at the divine plan of evolution for humanity, and to see where this a type of change that's been probably discussed in ADIA, and hopefully I can look at some aspects tonight, to see where this fits in to that divine plan, which is behind the wisdom teachings and behind the establishment of the society. So, then I'll briefly explore some of the, I've called how we've been hoodwinked, maybe I should say, just looking at some of the impediments in the mind that have blocked the light of divine wisdom within us to such an extent that we don't remember who we really are. We don't remember who we really are. Now, there was a saint in the Christian literature who said something, it might have been St. Ambrose, and I'm happy to be corrected, who said, we have to become who we already are. That's the oxymoron too. We have to become who we already are. And I've got a feeling that in order to go forward, we have to go backwards and clear the path. Okay. So, this remembrance of who we are, of course, one of the biggest things I think in the Hindu tradition is that all our pain and suffering comes from the fact that we are ignorant about who we are. So that fits in with that a little bit too. And so perhaps this life on earth of ours is really all about, it's a game. Think of it as a game of discovery and remembrance of who we are. A game of discovery and remembrance of who we are. And finally, I'd like to look at the process of change and maybe some of the tools that would be most useful for any kind of transformative happening in our lives. You know, we talk about mindfulness, we talk about awareness, and Krishnamurti has challenged us on many fronts about our mind. But I'm just wondering, I wonder if you've ever thought about what it would be like to have a totally different mind. Okay? Just for a moment, imagine that you go on eBay. No, forget eBay, you get a second-hand mind. We've got one already, we don't want any more of those. Now, Krishnamurti reminds us about that many times. Because we've taken on the beliefs of others since birth, right? And spend our lives conforming to those beliefs and to the expectations. We always want to conform to expectations of others, which we take on ourselves. So, but imagine there was a new website, free app. I don't understand all these words, but I thought I'd throw them in, but to be modern. Imagine there was a new website you could download, download a new mind, not a used one, but with the opportunity for a made-to-order one on your own design. On the application form, you had to actually list the characteristics that you would like in this new mind. I'm going to ask 1 in every 10 person to think of one characteristic they'd like in a moment, so be prepared. And I wonder, what would you choose? How would it be any different from the one you have now? And what difference would it make? Would you be the same person? I'm kind of, as they say, as Dr. Sheldon Cooper would say, I'm just messing with you. Okay, I'm just messing with you. But it's an interesting thought, even though it may be a little bit nonsensical. Have you thought about it? How, if your mind's a separate thing, is it just giving you how it is? It's an interesting little thing that I thought about. You can see I enjoyed it that day when I was thinking about that. But to think about and to stimulate our thinking about mindsets, have a little story about a character who is known as the Laughing Buddha. The Laughing Buddha. Most of us recognise the Laughing Buddha. My favourite one is of him walking along, and this is the traditional one, walking along with his cloth sack over his shoulder. He's happy little Vegemite, as we'd say in Australia. And he's got a really fat belly, he's known for his fat belly. He's traditionally seen in New Age shops, and even the $2 shops these days. And the symbol of his whole demeanour and the sack is happiness, good luck and abundance. According to legend, he used to travel around the towns, and the children would gather around him. He would give out these gifts to the children, never ending, and then after the gifts had been distributed, he'd put down the sack and he'd tilt his head back and he would laugh at the sky. He would laugh and laugh and laugh. And those around him would start laughing too, and they'd laugh. And it's just wholehearted, absolute totality of laughing with him. That's the name, the Laughing Buddha. Okay, so there's the legend. And also there's a popular saying that has been written about this story. I checked it out on Google, where you check everything out, and it says it's probably unfounded and it doesn't belong to him at all. And you may have already heard it. I like it because it represents how a mind can view the world in a radically different way from others. So, it is said that he said, when you realise that everything is perfect, you'll tilt back your head and you'll laugh at the sky. Again, when you realise, not see, but or when you actually realise that everything is perfect, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. So I rang up a few of my friends and I put this quotation to them, unfairly I suppose, and I got a range of responses. I've just included some that were different. The first one, my brother, he must have been chewing wacky tobacco. It's just escapism. It's escapism from this world to see that. In other words, it's escapism. It's not real. And someone very seriously said, all the pain and the suffering in the world is not a laughing matter. It never has been. The other one, what does he see that I don't? What am I missing? Another one, who's a 76-year-old friend of mine, she said, he just sees it as it is. He sees it as it is. It's perfect in terms of where everybody's at. I'll leave these with you. Now, for most, this perception of the world, if you ask people how, what do you think of the world, say the world, the world being perfect would hardly be the first thing you'd say. And doesn't compute with our perceptions. So why is he laughing? Well, what is the perfection one? What is the perfection he sees? When we probably see imperfection, fragmentation, discord, chaos, conflict that has been generated by, as we know, fear, ambition, greed, all of those things. And we've seen them in our own life experiences, and we see them across the world. So it would appear we can conclude graciously that it would take an enlightened state of mind to have something to do with saying the world is perfect. But no matter the origin, this saying has strong appeal as the expression of a mind that sees with the eyes of wisdom beyond the outer appearances of the world into the hidden reality of the nature of things, the workings of the mind, and the guidance of universal laws, the guidance of the world by universal laws. Also this mind, notice the characteristics of the Buddha. He's characterised, he's happy, he's totally giving, he's joyous, and the sack on his back actually is supposed to have unending, what's like a bottomless pit. So he can keep on giving and keep on giving. I quite like that Buddha. I actually have one in my car, in the recess where the speedo is. I have that little Buddha sitting there. He's the happy chappy. The problem is I didn't fix him somewhere, so that when I hit do a right-hand turn, a left-hand turn, often he'd go across there. And I must say, I used to be a lead foot. I've changed with the number of infringements, but I thought I picked him out one day, and I thought, oh dear, you do look the worse for wear. One arm had been broken off there, and he'd lost his head, but he was still laughing. So I thought he could stay there. I got some blue tack, I put it in the recess there, and he's still sitting there. He's really into armlessness, isn't he? And who saw that one coming? Oh, Paul. Okay, so he's happy. And the fact that six centuries earlier, Gautama the Buddha was the first in our present human life wave to achieve an enlightened mind. He's the first in our present human life wave to achieve an enlightened mind. He went out to seek the cause of human suffering and to find out how the cause could be dissolved. The fact that he did it, he went out himself, and you know the story, he tried all sorts of things. The fact that he did it shows us our potential to change, because it's been done before. His was a search of self-devised effort. If you remember, he went to the ascetics, who abstained from everything. Then he went to the other extreme, indulged in everything to try and satisfy all those appetites, which didn't work. So the middle way, of course, became one of the principles of Buddhism. But he embraced his search wholeheartedly, a trial and error approach. I'm giving some clues here. Trial and error approach, practical research, didn't have his head in books all the time, and finally, deep inner contemplation under a tree for 1.5 years. I'm not sure about that detail. But I'm saying this is the way he did it his way, himself, and this way of doing things, I think, has not changed from that time. And the Buddha, with nirvana, the clearing of the old, death of the old mind, you might say, cleared the way for a way of seeing the world, probably the one that's represented by the laughing Buddha, and to act with compassionate understanding, with happiness, joyousness, with abundance in giving. These are the characteristics. And he would see as the Christ, or the Krishna sees, the same eyes. The Christ, in one sense, represents the enlightened, the God-man, if you like, the enlightened person who has self-realised. The inner spiritual being has been able to express itself in the outer physical realms. And that's the aim of our journey on earth as I see it. And then the big journey of the soul begins after the kindergarten stage we're at now. Someone might like to take on me on that one too. Another feature of that mind is the non-judgment. Non-judgment. That replaces judgment, of course, or compassionate understanding replaces the judgment of the lower mind. When you realise how perfect everything is, think of the number of times today I've said something to the opposite. Right? It's just so easy the way our lower mind operates. So when you see how perfect everything is, you realise how perfect everything is, you tilt back your head and you laugh at the sky. The Creator, in its perfection, the Creator in its perfection, give you a hint, in its perfection, its wisdom and love, can such a Creator create an imperfect world? I'll leave that question with you. I'll leave you with the thought of how you would explain the quotation from the laughing Buddha. Okay, moving on now to the tears, quickly on to the tears, and place of a new mind in the TS purpose. And of course, if anyone looked at the meditation this morning, you would see it's pretty central. Remember, it's pretty central. The creation of a new mind, or raising the consciousness of man, is very central to the establishment of the Theosophical Society. Initiated from the inner brotherhood, and in the divine plan of evolution of humanity, this particular era we are in, it's not 3 weeks or something, it's quite a very long span of time. But this particular time, this transition, was very important for turning the corner from the densest, if you like, the densest experience of humanity in coming and descending from the spiritual, the density of matter, and of course the upward arc is to extend into more spiritualized consciousness as you turn around. But there's a few critical points in that turning, and that's where we are, is my understanding at the moment. The first object of the society, universal brotherhood, is really, as I see it, a spiritual concept, a spiritual principle that would be known by a mind that is not based in, if you like, the physicality of the physical senses or the lower desire mind. And that was the intention and the goal of the society. So you can see the raising of consciousness to the level of a brotherhood, of the brotherhood of men and women, implies a higher level of perception, a higher level of understanding of who we are. This new society also, as we well know, the Mahatma letters gave out a lot of good teachings in a different manner by letters. And the Master, or Mahatma Kutumi, spoke of the coming of a new continent of thought, a new continent of thought. Of course, that really refers to a new mind. So the agent through which the Masters worked was H.P. Blavatsky. And the teachings came through, and the society was going to be the channel for these teachings to be a beacon of light to the world. And they left all the organisation, the Masters left the organisation to the founders to do what they thought was the right thing to do. As HPB said originally, they didn't tell us what to do, but they told us not to do, which was to become, in a way, like a traditional religion. When Blavatsky described Theosophy as, in the key to Theosophy, as divine nature, I looked at that again, it gave me quite a start, because we think of, oh, we're doing Theosophy, what do you immediately think of? You think that it's divine nature? How many think of Theosophy as divine nature? Anyone? You think of all those teachings in books? Okay. I must say, well, I didn't, and I thought, well, Theosophy defines divine nature was quite unusual. I had to think about that. But then its literal meaning is divine wisdom. So of course it's divine nature. So that's what she said in the key to Theosophy, and she was establishing a relationship between Theosophy and the TS. I'll read the quote. Theosophy is divine nature, visible and invisible. Its society is human nature, members, trying to ascend to its divine parent. The society was formed to assist in showing to men that such a thing as Theosophy exists, such a thing as divine nature exists, and to help them to ascend to it by studying and assimilating its verities. Very simply, the society is to help men and women ascend towards their superior nature, superior divine nature. And this is to happen on earth. It doesn't happen, we don't suddenly, when we pass over, jump out of the body and say, really, now I'm spiritual, I've made it. It has to be achieved in incarnation, in the physical plane. The spiritual needs to be expressed out into the physical, like the laughing Buddha. Okay? So this journey is to be done through incarnation, as we know, on earth, and it's subject to karmic and cyclic law. In a way, the essence of Theosophy is also, she describes in a letter to the Americans. Now, those 3 letters she wrote very late in her life, the Americans, about theosophy and what she hoped the Americans would do. I think she meant this to all theosophists. Are very, very instructional. I think she was realising she was coming to her end and she just wanted to leave some pointers for the future. And she said in that letter, 1888, to the American Convention, the essence of theosophy is the perfect harmonising of the divine in the human, the divine with the human in man. We have to harmonise the divine with the human. The adjustment of his godlike qualities and aspirations and their sway over terrestrial passions in him, because passions, of course, belong to the lower mind. She characterises it as kindness, absence of every ill feeling, selfishness, charity, goodwill to all beings, perfect justice to others as to oneself. Interesting, perfect justice to others as to oneself. That sounds a little bit like the first object, doesn't it? No discrimination, no prejudice. They're its chief features. There's another HBB quotation from the Clear Theosophy which reinforces the idea of our inner divinity. And on that note, Brother Gina Rajadosa, who was a president of the Theosophical Society, I think he ended in 1953, he said that TS was mainly concerned with helping members understand their inner divine nature. When I first read that, I was surprised, because that's not what I thought Theosophy was about. Blavatsky says, the divine spark in man, being one and identical in its essence with the universal spirit, our spiritual self is practically omniscient. Our spiritual self is practically omniscient. But it cannot manifest its knowledge owing to the impediments of matter. The more these impediments are removed, the more fully can the inner self manifest on this plane. So there you have it. That's the journey of change that we are to, if not already embarked on, take a look at. Of course, we may take a look at it and not choose to do it, and that's perfectly fine as well. Right. The journey has been described, I think, by the TOS, the journey from egocentrism to altruism. And this is summarised actually in another letter that Blavatsky wrote to Americans, and she said, the most important holy mission of this society is to unite firmly a body of men of all nations in brotherly love and bent on pure altruism, not on a labour with selfish motives. So in this context, the journey is, we're talking with mind tonight, the journey is from an egocentric mind, me, mine, that is founded on separation or separateness and self-centeredness, to a mind that is centered on oneness, these abstract principles that we've been throwing around for quite a while, on oneness, the interconnectedness of all existence, an overriding concern for the welfare of the whole and the one life we're all part of. This has been the theory, this is what I have read or heard since I've joined the society, and I'll be honest, I've left it there in the abstract form and thinking, that's nice, that's nice. But I think it's time we took a closer look at this, what this means in action. So at this critical midpoint in our evolution, when much fear is being generated on the planet, the work of the society as a channel of theosophy is even more critical. We can understand, I think, how by seeing everything as being separate, that heresy of separateness is one of those foundation impediments, the way we see things, that this causes all the problems on earth at this time. When you look at wars, competitions for power and wealth, and all the famines, prejudices, and all forms of discrimination, these arise from separateness, seeing others as separate from ourselves. Just thinking of the first object again, no discrimination because of race, gender, class, language, caste, status, education, all of these things. Many things, you could add a list of them. It's really prejudice and discrimination of any kind. So, where does this come from? In theosophical terms, it comes from the karma manas, the desire mind. And the journey of transition we're on is to the other Sanskrit word, buddhi manas, an enlightened mind. So we've got to go from a desire mind, centered on me, mine, to a mind of, I should say, a wisdom mind, if you like, a wisdom mind that comes from compassion and understanding. By mentioning separateness, I'll have to now go straight into looking at how we come to see separateness. And to make sure that we do understand it is the physical senses, not the culprit, but it comes back to the physical senses. Because we see, we hear, we see separateness, don't we? Diversity, look at the differences here, the colours, the shapes, the sizes, the textures. Our physical senses are necessary for our orientation in the physical world. But they orientate us in separateness. Okay. So a new mind then must consider how it would replace this, how it would work with its opposite. And I'm suggesting, of course, that the architecture of the new mind would be based on the theosophical worldview. I don't think that would surprise you very much at all. But this new mind would give us all equal status. I think it's said somewhere that in God's economy, or the economy of God, or the One, no one is greater or lesser. And when you would consider that the soul itself is genderless, and we've got all this prejudice and sexism and everything else going on, there's a lot of work here to be done. Nelson Mandela made a very profound, simple but profound statement about what's wrong with our minds. He said, "No one is born hating another person because of the colour of their skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." Nice statement. Simple, but good. Mandela concluded that prejudice has been learned, and we do know that. We might even know that it may have come in from past as well. The mind, whose nature is truth, has been modified, and I use the word programmed a lot because I see our brain as a computer, and we respond to the idea of computer programs, don't we? So this is a program here. And I've been helping one lass back in Australia who's not a theosophist, she's not anything, avoids organisations like the plague, but she's searching for something. So of course I fit in some ideas, some basic ideas about theosophy. And she's talking about the idea that, I should say this, she does read and like Eckhart Tolle's work. Eckhart Tolle's work. So she's working on the idea that if she on the one hand she tried to do the meditation thing and it didn't work, it was something she didn't know really what she was working towards. Well, maybe you don't, because it wasn't Maharishi Ramana who said, just keep asking, who am I? Who am I? But I think Krishnamurti said once, well, after 20 years and they're still asking, who am I? What would you do to help them? I don't know, give them a new cushion, I suppose. Okay. Anyhow, learning, one of the things of the new mind, I was talking about that too. Reprogram ourselves with love is not at the same level as hate. Because hate and discrimination, loathing, that's a programming of the, I'll say the lower mind, the desire mind. but unconditional love comes from spirit. So that belongs in the higher mind. You know, love can love through us. Love can love through us, through the personality that's aligned to the higher self. If I said Dorothy loves so-and-so, personality is distinguishing perhaps something else. I've got a little story to talk about love and unconditional love. An elderly friend of mine who has significant psychic abilities, and she's a real hoot with it. I think that's one of the prerequisites of change, any change path. Everyone, sense of humour. In learning to love unconditionally, she was actually telling me one day she loves to ring up and have a chat. And the sorts of stories she tells me are really to do with her meditation. She said, I can't meditate, so I just go and talk to God. And I said, okay, so what happened last month? And so she said, oh, that was a good one. She said, I really was telling God, and I said, how do you see God? She said, oh, there's incredible white light. And she said, sometimes it just quivers and laughs at me when I say sort of really silly things, but that's all right. And I said, well, what was last month's story? And she said, well, I was really talking about the universe, and I thought how wonderful and great and majestic and just being in awe of the creation, really. And then I was telling him this or it this, and then I said I told God how much I loved him. And I thought, oh, that's nice. And then she said, well, immediately I got a response, no, you don't. And she said, I was dismayed, I was stunned, I was shocked. I do, she said, I do love you. And then the reply came back, how can you love me when you don't love yourself? How can you love me when you don't love yourself? I think that's a bit of a checkmate, isn't it? I believe this statement is relevant to all of us, or we wouldn't be on the planet, to be honest. We need to ask ourselves, why don't we love ourselves? Or why don't we accept ourselves as we are? Why don't we accept ourselves as we are? And this morning we were talking really about little things in our shoes and other little knots and things that we carry around with us. We need to unwind and unravel. But I'm talking here about why don't we love ourselves as we are? We'll say, oh, okay, I'm a spiritual being, I love that bit of me, but I don't like all the flaws and the imperfections that I have. Where does self-judgment come from? Self-crucifixion and self-persecution. And from our own experience, we know when we think negatively, when we have negative thoughts, how low our vibration is. How low our vibration is. And when we have happy thoughts, joyous thoughts, how high our vibration is. So we know how emotions, energy in motion, how we are, how we can express ourselves through our emotions, and we can gauge our own well-being or balance, if you like, and often that of others. Right. So we're looking for our potential for change, to change negative to positive. We need to know the workings of the mind. We can't, or someone reminded me once, unless you want to be a mystic, and you just go out and you, whatever mystics do. I think I'm too left-brained to be a mystic. I know Annie Besant was a little suspect of mystics when she said that, she said something to the effect that maybe mystics are just lost in themselves, the emotional experience. Now we all know that H.P. Blavatsky said of Annie Besant, intellectuality 100%, spirituality. So Annie Besant would have been analysing intellectually what a mystic does in terms of their mind. So it's not surprising she came up with that conclusion. If we're looking for our potential for change, we need to look at the workings of the mind. And we all know that expression from the voice of the silence. The pupil must seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer who awakes illusion. The mind is the slayer of the real. The mind is the slayer of the real. Slay the slayer. It's the most popular saying, but in this case, when we're talking about the mind and what we have to do, it's very appropriate. So how does the programmed mind actually slay the reality of who we really are? Already perfect, already whole, just as the Creator made us, perfect. How many of you does that not sit well with? You don't have to put your hand up, I'm just playing teacher. If it doesn't sit well with our programming, consider the proposition that no creator who is perfect could create anything imperfect. And we've all been made in the image of the Maker, of our Maker. Okay? Let's use a little left-brain logic here, it comes in handy. As the world will be seen as the laughing Buddha sees it. Right? The idea of perfection. We have been made in the image of our Maker. Our Maker is a perfect creator, omniscient, all-knowing, all-seeing, all of those superlatives, unknown and unknowable really, but we're made in its image, perfect. So why do we think we're imperfect? Who slayed the real? Okay, quick look at programming, because I know New Zealand has, Vic's been over here and you're all really self-transformed already, so this is a quick revision. There's a popular, yeah, that's a revision, all right. Quickly, since birth, we have absorbed, most of us, the Western civilization, absorbed a three-dimensional Western materialist, one lifetime worldview. Most of us, I think. A set of beliefs based on the 5 physical senses that prove to us each day that we are separate from each other. Remember I said earlier, come back to the physical senses. We are in the physical plane. We need the physical senses. We need the vehicle to travel this plane for our experiences in our journey. Okay. But we have to deal with and be aware of how the physical senses challenge us daily. Of course we work with them, we walk and we talk, we work, we go to the workplace, we have our thing, but we've got to then also balance it with who we truly are. But going back to the notion of separateness, the mind is programmed primarily in this, Buddhists call the heresy of separateness. And from this separateness, fear is born. Fear. Fear is born. And love is exiled. We are compared and judged by parents, positively or negatively, siblings, peer groups, teachers. As teachers, look how we rank students. Any teachers here? Rank students in the old days. I hope that maybe changing, personal best, but we rank them all. Place in class, 5th, 49th. What does that do to the self-image? Right? So we're ranked, we're computerised everywhere. And these days we're put in little boxes. The intellect plus little boxes compartmentalises everything, even our beliefs about ourselves. And a word about beliefs, they're things we hold strongly to, but we don't know they're true. We just hold them because we haven't come across the truth in our own experience, but we hold them. And beliefs separate people. Beliefs cause wars. Beliefs cause murder and killing. So beliefs are really dicey things, really. So you know now why I'm strong on converting intellectual knowledge into direct experience and personal knowledge and experience that becomes your knowledge and knowing. And from that point, we can work towards that using a theosophical worldview to the knowing, an inner knowing that starts to bridge into the higher mind, a knowing. And so Theosophy gives us these abstract concepts of oneness, interrelatedness, interconnectedness that makes it terribly hard for our senses to even come to grips with. So our programming programs us into seeing others as different, okay? And through comparison, we'll compare ourselves, and we're lesser than or greater than. You see how through comparison you get the idea of you are better than or less than. Okay? So this is where the prejudice comes in, and this is where fear comes in, fear of not being accepted. Because within us there's an impulse to belong. And this impulse, if you like, I'll say impulses us to seek union or acceptedness or belongingness in the outer. And probably it's the union of the soul to unite within. But we search outwards for that union with something that we know will make us whole. But the whole, where is the wholeness? It's already within. So that's our journey within, to know that. We do not know in all our programming, we do not know that we are an aspect of the one life. We do not know that we are a unit of the universal consciousness. It's not in our programming. Okay? We don't know that we are a divine spiritual being within. And I'll use the word divine because Blavatsky used it. So I'm happy in using it as well. To say our inner nature is divine. If you like, the divine self, the spiritual self, which cannot be divided. The spirit cannot be divided. So spiritual cannot be, it's oneness, it's unity. Whereas intellectual, in the physical plane, can divide into compartments. So if you take that to extension, and looking at the whole idea of the one life, key concept in Theosophy, the one reality, the one life. And Sri Ram had that wonderful saying, life is nothing but consciousness conditioned by the form in which it resides. So you have a horse that's conscious, you have a snake, you have a dog or a cat, you have a human. All consciousness, all part of the one life. The crystal, the tree, the grass, the slug, the spider, all from the same consciousness, but restricted and conditioned by the form in which it resides. So we are a part of that whole. We are a part of that one life. This is very, very hard to actually appreciate. But remember that the Christ Jesus said, the Father and I are one. The Father and I are one. And the psalmist in the Old Testament, Psalm 87, said, ye are gods. Ye are gods. And all of you are children of the Most High. And an analogy to try and explain this perhaps in concrete terms. Think of a tree, a huge tree, trunk, branches and leaves. Think of the trunk as the creator. And the leaves, you're a leaf, I'm a leaf. Okay? We are all connected, but we're all separated. What is it that connects us? That living energy of the tree. The trunk is the creator. So that's maybe a simple analogy to think of. Think of our connectedness and the one life and our interconnectedness. You know, Annie Besant said, we are blinded by form. We certainly are. And someone else said, we are blinded by ego. Take your pick on that one. What about all these flaws and imperfections that drag us down? This is all very nice. We can say it's very nice that we are divine beings. But, you know, we've still got our physical views of ourselves, our flaws and imperceptions. What about those? Unlike the programming for churches, and I was brought up in a particular church, the God or the one, or that's referred to as Theosophical teachers, there's no judgment at all. Judgment is a man-made thing. And of course, it's if you like, it's projected on to God is made in the image of man. So it's the other way around, you see. So I would see that as the one does not judge. Because the perfect instrument of divine justice is a universal law called karma, which adjusts. Its work is to harmonise. Its work is to harmonise the universe. So I don't know if you read the article, John Algier, Discord. Discord is the harmony of the universe. And that was a quote that Mahatma Kutumi put in his letters to Mr. Sinnott. That, if you like, the universal law is, if you like, the replacement from the old heaven-hell concept. And in other words, we create our own destiny by our actions. And a negative action will be harmonised in future. And I call karma the greatest educational tool there is. Because after a while, we do get it, don't we? When some little thing keeps happening to us, we come from perceptions. So how you look at a situation, you can see this operating daily. When there's layoffs at a factory that's happening, GMH Holden in Victoria, in Melbourne at the moment, that's going to happen in the future, it's going to close down. So a lot of people are in a deep spin about their jobs in the future. Some people are actually desperate and wondering how they're going to support their families, especially the older workers. And others are saying, right, opportunity, off I go, I'll look for some work now. How you look at things, how you take on possible adversity, very important. So when we look at things as separate, unconnected, that's the lower mind, or we can start thinking about looking at things as they are connected in the Theosophical worldview. Another nice little analogy about being interconnected, and you might remember this one a little easier because it's rather odd. Imagine we are all in a jar of pickled onions. Imagine we are all a pickled onion, all right? We're all in a huge jar. We're all a pickled onion. Pickled onion. The pickling juice is the oneness. Oneness that is imbued in you and me and everything else. The oneness of the pickling juice. Okay? That might be easier to remember. And how we interconnect. What interconnects us? If you go back to the analogy of the tree, what interconnects the leaves is the energy of the Creator. The living energy of the Creator. You can't see it, it's all hidden. So, if we start to think in this way, let's just tie it up to a new world. Even think what would happen if we all accepted ourselves today exactly as we are. Thinking we have these flaws and imperfections which come from wrong perception, but don't worry about that. We still say they're real because I can't sing like Dame Nellie Mulder, and I can't perform like someone, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I'm not good enough, and we're never good enough, are we? All of these perceptions. So, when the day comes when we can accept ourselves and each other as we are now, warts and all, what would happen? What would happen? Think about it. Do we want a new world for future humanity? We transform ourselves. As we transform ourselves, we transform the world. Because there's another basic principle from psychology and philosophy. Thoughts create our reality. We create our reality by our thoughts. And our thoughts come from perceptions. In conclusion, hearing you, we don't need reminding that nature is our best teacher. I acknowledge HBB for inspiring her inspiration from some of these thoughts that I put together. We see a flower slowly developing from a bud, and the bud from the plant, and the plant from its roots, and the roots from a seed buried in the nurturing womb of the earth. But from where? Where comes the predetermined program of physical transformation of this seed into a root, a plant, a bud, a flower? From where comes the predetermined program and its invisible, therefore spiritual forces which gradually develop its form, its colour, its perfume? They come from the same place, from the same unknown and unknowable source, from the same creative intelligence of the one life that causes worlds and universes to appear and disappear. This predetermined program and its invisible forces of transformation from a seed to a flower come from the same divine mind and creative intelligence who designed and set in place the divine plan of evolution in which we have our being. We have our being in this setup, in this plan. We have our existence, we have our purpose, and we have our identity. And we have our destiny. We are destined to become who we already are, no matter how long it takes. It is our journey as seeds or sparks of the divine to grow and to bloom into full consciousness of who we really are. This is the purpose, as I said, in the wisdom teachings of our earth experiences. The earth is a schoolhouse. We are here to experience. Here to experience and to learn. And this, as I said earlier, is the game of discovery and remembrance.